If you think about some of the most famous opening scenes of all time, there is always one thing in common, and it's what happens during the first minute. In an age of YouTube and TikTok, you need to be able to grab the audience's attention quickly. You have a minute or two to catch them, or they will just turn it off. But how do you grab their attention, and what can we learn from some of the most creative opening scenes of all time? I want to break this down into 3 parts: the writer, the cinematographer, and the director. The writer has the original idea. It was them who first conceived these memorable opening scenes. The cinematographer creates the striking images that we first see, and when there is no dialogue in the first minute, it is their job to set the scene. And finally we have the director. They are the brains of the whole operation, and what we see will ultimately be their idea. In order to know what makes a good opening scene, we need to look at where it starts, and that's the screenplay. The best example of this is in The Social Network, throwing us into the middle of a conversation and leaving us to pick up the pieces. We want to know what happens next, where this leads, and why it's even happening in the first place. There are countless videos breaking down why the script is so good and what makes Aaron Sorkin's writing so special. But why do we even continue watching in the first place? What is it in the first minute that keeps us engaged? I'll split this into 3 parts: the mise-en-scène, the structure, and the writing. Like any other Finch film, the visuals are perfect. Everything from the cinematography to the production design is impeccable, and I have a short video essay surrounding the cinematography that I will link in the top right corner and description below. If you aren't familiar with mise-en-scène, the dictionary definition is the process of setting a stage with regard to placement of actors, scenery, properties, etc. When it comes to the actual production of the film, it is quite possibly the most important part. It sets the stage for the story ahead. With The Social Network, they throw you into the middle of a bar and leave you there to figure out the pieces. From the first frame, we can tell that Mark doesn't care about fashion, and even though it's a student bar where the majority of people are in casual clothing, he is still underdressed. We are also greeted with simple yet bold compositions, utilising centre framing and close-ups. The production design and lighting also helps us find out where we are quickly. With the dark lighting and full bar, it is very easy to distinguish that we are in a student bar. Obviously the fact that it is full of people in their 20s helps, but mise-en-scène is the result of all of these aspects put together. The structure of this scene is probably the most memorable in the entire film. There's a beginning, middle and end, starting with the facts and semi-normal conversation.
I didn't know they take SATs in China.
They don't. I wasn't talking about China anymore, I was talking about me.
Turning to the breakup, and ultimately them going their separate ways. We started at the end of the relationship between 2 characters. We were also in the past, which isn't unusual for Sorkin scripts, but on a first watch of the film, we don't know that yet, and it's another thing that keeps us guessing. It's a fast-paced film, and the script reflects that. At 162 pages with an opening scene lasting 8 of those, it was hard work to get it in under 2 hours. Sorkin dialogue tends to be very intentional. There is a lot of thought behind every word, and he manages to keep every conversation between characters sharp. But I don't want to spend too much time talking about the script and writing, as Lessons from the Screenplay has an excellent video surrounding that, which if you haven't seen, I will link in the top right corner and description below. We continue watching because we want to know what happens with Mark. The mise-en-scène and direction all play a part, but Sorkin has left unresolved questions, and we want to know the answers. A film that you may not have heard about, but was directed by Chloe Zhao, who is now one of the most acclaimed directors working today, is The Rider. I find it to have one of the most striking opening scenes in recent years, yet a word isn't spoken for 3 minutes. Now obviously the director plays a huge part in how an opening scene is told. After all, it was her who wrote the script. But Joshua James Richards has managed to elevate the story by telling it through pictures. It was his job to write the script of the first few minutes. We open on a horse fading in and out before Brady finally wakes up. The fading in and out signifies a dream, and now we know that it was one. We see the title card and then he walks through his trailer. The lighting is dull and we are thrown into a very organic and raw setting. Using handheld allows for Richards to bring the audience into the mind of the character. It feels as though we are now there with him. We find out that he has been injured and is having to take what seems to be painkillers to make it more bearable. He then has a cigarette, takes his bandages off and has a shower. We now know it's the morning and not the middle of the night. The opening scene ends with him and his horse at sunrise.
How you doing, Bart?
Why does all of this work so well though? Really, it's a factor of several things coming together. We have a carrying character, an invisible camera, and animals. It's very stereotypical, but animals will always make the audience feel something. Whether it's sympathy or pain, they have this ability in cinema to change the mood of an entire scene. The reason why we sympathise with animals so much more though, is just down to innocence. They don't have a say in the life they get, and we can't even properly communicate with them. The cinematography plays the biggest part in this opening scene, as there is no dialogue for the first 3 minutes. Joshua James Richards has been able to tell the story through the camera. Like his and Zhao's other films, they have created a very organic setting. The lighting is natural, we are on a shoulder, and we are brought into the world of a character. Richards also uses a lot of close-ups throughout this scene, and that is also something that really helps make the audience feel for the character. We can see the pain in his eyes, but also the love for his horse. Cinematography in general is very specific to the film. You want it to look good, but you also need it to tell the story.
But I think people confuse pretty with good cinematography. What was it Freddie Francis says? There was good cinematography and bad cinematography, and then there's the cinematography that's right for the movie.
Brady also plays a huge part in telling the story in the opening scene, almost more than the cinematography does. We find him to be caring and we instantly feel bad for him as he is injured, but that's just human nature. There are many films that don't have dialogue in the first 5, 10 or even 15 minutes, but the way in which Zhao and Richards have constructed this in order for us to know everything about the character before a word even leaves his mouth and in 3 minutes is extraordinary. If you only take one thing away from this video, it should be to watch this film. When planning this video, I went through many different films for this category. Fargo, Dazed and Confused,
Alright.
Boogie Nights, but Portrait of a Lady on Fire really stood out. I still remember the opening scene vividly, and it's been months since my last watch. Why though? Why am I remembering this opening scene more than all of the others? Like I've said before, it's asking questions from the first minute. We are also at the end of the story, in the present, whilst the rest happens in the past. It just makes us want to know what did happen. What else makes us want to continue watching though? Is it the cinematography, the acting, the dialogue? It's all of the above. Like with The Rider, Céline Sciamma tells us everything that we need to know about this character in the first minute. We are greeted with Marianne, the main character, and we already know to an extent what happens in the end. We can tell from her response to the students that she doesn't like to talk about the events that we are about to see, and her voice implies that it was quite possibly the most important 2 weeks in her life. Sciamma keeps the scenes simple, but in a film like this, and especially a scene like this, less is more. We want to feel the character's emotions and feel as though we aren't being interrupted by anything. The dialogue in any opening scene is special, and even more so here, we aren't really given that much to go off. Each word spoken has so much meaning behind it, and it really starts to show through their performances. I also want to quickly mention Claire Matone's cinematography, as it helps tell so much of the story. The way they have framed the scene and each shot creates not only isolation but warmth. I think the only comparison to this would be Barry Lyndon. Each frame is like a painting. I could spend hours analysing this film and the first 5 minutes, which I might in the future, but it really just comes down to simplicity. Less is more when it comes to all aspects of period dramas, in my opinion anyway. Céline Sciamma has crafted the perfect opening scene. It's simple, has no music, nothing to detach the audience from the story, and sets the premise for an awe-inspiring piece of cinema.
Portrait de la jeune fille en feu.
Ultimately, when directors, writers, cinematographers are looking to immerse the audience in the story, they do all of 3 things. Have a sharp opening conversation, use striking imagery in order to tell the story without words, and most importantly, they keep you guessing. They want you to ask yourself, what is going to happen next, and they will get you to stay around for it. I hope you enjoyed this video looking at what makes a good opening scene. If you found it informative, a like is appreciated, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, then hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.